Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are across the United States, North America, or around the world. And we're delighted to see some international registrants joining us from both Europe and the South Pacific today. Delighted to be joined with you. My name's Chris Adams. I look after research and insights at Miles Partnership, and this is Clarity in a Time of Change. I'll come back to that update on our theme in a moment, but let me introduce a marvelous panel roster of speakers. We're delighted to be joined by Andrea Godfrey, who's Vice President at Longwoods International. Hello, Andrea. Andrea is going to be sharing the latest travel sentiment research from Longwoods that we've been supporting and working with them on over the last 12 months. We've also got Vera Helakanen, and my apologies if I've mispronounced your surname, Vera, I did practice it, who's Marketing and Communications Director at the Helsinki Business Hub. And you'll remember a colleague of Vera's, Laura Alto, the City of Marketing, that's now merging with the Helsinki Business Hub. And Vera's going to be talking about the free worker, the trend towards the opportunities around remote working and remote workers. And we're also delighted to be joined by Maggie Weaver, who's Director of Marketing at the wonderful hotel and resort of Hilton Sandestin on the Gulf Coast there in Florida. And she's going to be sharing some of the unique things that their property's been doing to attract remote workers. So just a reminder here about the agenda. So we'll dive into the research first. We'll look at the latest ways in which Americans are thinking about the spring and summer travel season and the outlook and opportunities that presents. We're then going to look at a number of different parts of the free worker, the opportunities around the change in work, the place of work, and how remote working has really been accelerated by the pandemic. So we'll look at the Helsinki and Hilton Sandestin case studies. We're going to have a panel discussion. We'll poll you to understand who's doing what in this space. Then we'll come back. I'll share just a couple of additional resources in that space, and then we'll end with Q&A. So this is an update to our theme. You might remember all last year we were running webinars providing research and resources and insight, and we called that Clarity in a Time of Crisis. So obviously with the significant rollout across North America, and we're just starting to see significant progress in Europe. Finland are up to 30% vaccination rate. We think there's obviously a time of opportunity. And so we're calling this Clarity in a Time of Change to really reflect the fact that we've got opportunities and challenges to deal with. So we'll be theming future webinars and research and resources around clarity in a time of change. All the resources from today are up on that website. Both the research we'll be presenting, the slides, and some of the other references that I'll be highlighting. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Andrea to look at the latest travel sentiment, how Americans are thinking about spring and summer travel in a time of change. Thanks a lot. Over to you, Andrea. I think you're muted, Andrea. It should be down in the bottom left.
There we go. Am I unmuted now?
Over to you. Yes, we can hear you.
All right, we're here. We have arrived. Without fail, Zoom, technical user issues every time over here. No, thank you so much for having me with y'all today. It's a pleasure to share this ongoing research that we've been doing in partnership with y'all there at Miles. Let's see, now that I'm muted, let's see if I can start progressing these slides. If y'all bear with me 2 seconds. There we go. So this is our 35th wave that we just released a couple hours ago for those of y'all that are on our email distribution. So we have been doing this study for 13 months now in partnership with Chris and the Miles Partnership team. So thank y'all so much for working with us on this wonderful gift to the industry. So we go into field every other week, speaking to 1,000 adults who are travelers here in the United States, talking to them about their sentiment as it pertains to travel and opening up their communities to visitors. So this data that we're going to look at today was released actually a couple hours ago, as I mentioned, but it was actually collected starting midweek last week, and we came out of field on Monday. So if I had to give a theme for this week, what I would say is this is pandemic highs. We started noticing back in mid-February and then really starting in March, a trend towards upward mobility with all of our sentiment indicators. And we see a lot of these indicators that we'll go through today continuing this upward trend, but also a lot of them seeing a high compared to what we saw for those pre-pandemic levels. And so when I say pre-pandemic, we're looking at the study that we released March 11th of last year. So we continue to see for the third straight wave in a row that 87% of American travelers have travel plans within the next 6 months. Again, this is on par with the high that we saw right before the pandemic. And so, as we all know, when we talk about 6 months, this obviously is encompassing the very end of spring here. It's also covering that summer travel season and a little bit into fall. But as we know that we are all starting to make those plans and dreams of the warmer months and getting out for the summer, we wanted to start asking these American travelers what they plan to participate in on those summer trips. And when we look at this, we see that 5 of the top 6 activities are dominated by outdoor activities. So going to relax at an ocean, lake, or river. So going to a state or national park, going on a hike or a bicycle ride. So while we saw in 2020, so at the peak of the pandemic, people were going outdoors, this seems to be a trend that we're going to continue to expect to go on as we look into those summer months. And so we've been asking since the start of the pandemic, the factors that impact their decisions to travel in the next 6 months. So we focus primarily on the coronavirus, concerns about financial situations and transportation costs. As we all know, whenever making travel-related decisions, there are a lot of factors that influence them. And these are the ones that we have asked about throughout the pandemic as they are a little bit unique for this current time. And when we ask those that would say that the coronavirus greatly impacted their decision to travel in the next 6 months, we see that this has dropped to 35%. Again, it's a low, but it's very positive and it's back to that pre-pandemic level. And so when we asked about the personal financial situation, we've seen this remain well at or a little bit below about 25%. Now we're down to 18%. And we have continued to see this decline over the last 3 waves. And you'll notice that whenever I look and I talk about the data, I'm going to say 3 waves. 1 data point is something to note. 2, we're looking at a trend. 3 means we have a trend. So we are seeing that concerns about the personal financial situation is actually starting to trend downward. So we ask them in terms of their impact on travel plans, the percent of travelers that are planning to actually change their plans due to coronavirus. And we're seeing that this is declining down to 56%. And this has stayed right around this data point for about a month now. And so for those that said that, yes, COVID-19 is going to impact their travel plans in the next 6 months, we asked them, what does that change look like? So what does change mean as we start to move through the pandemic? 23% of people actually say that COVID-19 is not impacting their travel plans. Mostly we see that people are reducing the number of trips that they're taking. They're choosing to drive versus fly. We've seen this hover around this 1/3 mark throughout the pandemic, and we're continuing to see that. And we're seeing that also about 30% are choosing to stay within the US as opposed to going internationally. And of course, given limitations of being able to leave and enter back into the country, this is not surprising at all. Now, only 12% say that they are choosing not to travel, and 8% are saying that they're actually canceling some travel plans. So well down from what we were seeing at the peak of the pandemic. So Perceptions of safety in travel are something that are really important for us when we have been looking at decisions to travel during the pandemic and the impact of COVID-19 on travel sentiment. But specifically, when we look at perceptions of safety in travel, we've started to see significant improvement and seeing trends within that. So when we ask American travelers, do you support opening up their communities to visitors? We see that we are at a pandemic high at 55% of Americans saying that they support opening up their community. Now, this is very important because when you ask people about a factor that goes into destination selection, we see over and again that it's friendliness of the local community. And so having a community that supports opening up and is welcoming to visitors is very important when we talk about actually having those travelers come into our destinations. So we asked, how would you feel safe traveling outside their community? Again, 3 data points makes a trend, and we see that this is officially trending upward. So not only are we seeing pre-pandemic people that have plans to travel in the next 6 months, we're seeing this actually coupled with the fact that right now nearly 60% of American travelers actually feel safe getting out of their community and going on trips. And so when you take these 2 factors in together, this is very strong when we talk about sentiment towards travel. So we also have seen significant trending in a positive direction for perceptions of safety about dining in local restaurants and shopping in local retail stores. We're seeing that this has trended up to 61%. Again, a positive trend, but also a pandemic high. So we started to realize right about the time when the vaccine rollout began that this was going to be such an important component of travel decision-making and planning. And so starting back in February, we started asking about the vaccine. And I want to highlight this week's data that's very, very important here. So we asked about the impact of the COVID-19 vaccine on travel plans, and we see that 2/3 of Americans, travelers, say that the vaccine is going to impact their plans to travel. About 1/3 of those that say that it's going to impact their plans say that they won't travel till they receive the vaccine. And what's very interesting when we start to look down here is that we see that it actually is not just a personal vaccine impact, but it's the vaccination of not only the communities that we live in. So saying that I will wait to travel until the majority of my community is vaccinated is about 17%, but then also people care about vaccination and the destination of interest, and that's about 20% of people. And so when we talk about the impact of the vaccine and vaccination on decisions to travel, it really is a little bit of a multivariate conversation. So when we look at the trending of waiting to travel until they receive the vaccine or saying the vaccine has no impact on travel plans, this has remained relatively stable since February when the plans for the vaccine rollout became more formalized and we kind of knew what that was going to look like. So it's been interesting to see a lot of stability around this. So we're still seeing about 1/3 of American travelers that are wanting to wait or that are saying, hey, it's not impacting my decision to travel. So a month ago, we asked about plans to get vaccinated. And so we know that the vaccine is a key ingredient for getting American travelers out on the roads and in airplanes and in our destinations. And so we wanted to ask them, what do those vaccine plans look like? And some very interesting data started to emerge this past week. So back in March, when we asked, have you been fully vaccinated? We saw that that was actually 18 percentage points below where it is today. So 42% of American travelers have been fully vaccinated. Another 15% have been partially vaccinated, and another 15% plan to be fully vaccinated by the end of May. So what's really interesting here when we take a look at this is that we see that the vaccination rates of American travelers are actually almost twice that of the American population at large. So we're seeing some very important trends here, and we're seeing actual trends, not just data points that show positivity and sentiment. We're seeing true growth in sentiment. It's that people with travel plans for the next 6 months is staying stable at pandemic highs. Perceptions of health and safety, specifically when it comes to your own community and moving about and welcoming visitors in, is starting to trend upward past those pandemic highs. And while we see that 2/3 of Americans feel that the vaccine or American travelers is going to impact their decision to travel, we actually see that these American travelers are out and they're getting vaccinated. And so they're really doing what they feel they need to do to get out on the road again and travel. And we're seeing that this rate is clipping about a little bit above that than the US overall. So again, we're seeing all the positive indicators moving in the direction that we need them to be. And so this was a very positive week when we talk about looking at travel sentiment.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And you can see there both the Clarity in a Time of Change website and also Longwood's international website. So the research is available on both of those. One thing I just wanted to highlight, and thanks again to Andrea, is the health and safety protocols. So I actually dug back into last wave's research, Andrea, a couple of weeks ago. And you'll see on this slide where we asked about the propensity to visit a tourism attraction or business that does not have clear protocols such as mask wearing or social distancing in place. So that still remains, despite the incredible positive trends around vaccination, a critical issue. So just a reminder there to be working with your business community, your attractions activities to ensure that they're maintaining clear health and safety messaging and keeping those protocols in place as we move forward. Thanks again, Andrea. I'll invite you back at the end for any Q&A. So just an additional reminder about a resource that you can also share with your business community. We developed a blog and a video. This is aimed at businesses, tourism and hospitality businesses of all types, around 5 critical digital marketing tasks they should be doing right now. So keeping their opening status, their hours, some of their other critical information and attributes across not just DMO websites, but the major platforms of Google, TripAdvisor, Facebook, Apple. So we highlight, excuse me, the critical opportunities across all of those areas. So please check that out and share that with your business community. Okay, without further ado, we want to dive into the special topic, the exciting topic of the free worker. I've been fortunate enough to spend the last number of months down in New Zealand, and we can see it in place there. We can see it in place across the American West, and the free worker has really accelerated a trend that's already been in place for some time. So work has changed, certainly during the pandemic, and coming out of the pandemic, some of these changes are going to be accelerating trends that were already in place, as well as creating new opportunities and challenges. And this presents, I think, fresh ways to think about tourism and tourism marketing and economic development, which we want to dive into today. This is all driven by what people want to do. This is research that was conducted across multiple countries, and you can see here that 2/3 of people like the idea and have enjoyed the opportunity to work remotely, and they'd like to continue to have that flexibility. That flexibility, of course, creates opportunity. McKinsey and Company have looked at this in depth, and they've got this white paper that we'll be sharing with you, where leading organizations of all types are rethinking what they're doing in terms of reshaping both how their organizations are structured in terms of physical places of work, as well as some of those work policies as well. And that's manifested itself in terms of real estate and the commercial real estate that companies are already making. And so this is an article in the New York Times just from the last week or so, where you can see some very big companies downsizing some of their physical space, as well as companies like Spotify have essentially said there's a tremendous degree of flexibility. And so while they're maintaining some workplaces, including their headquarters in Stockholm, they're giving great flexibility to where and how people are going to work in the future. I mentioned past trends, past opportunities. I want to give a shout out to Vermont. The state of Vermont has really been a pioneer in this concept for some time. Their Stay to Stay program, which has been running for the last 5 to 10 years, really invited people on a sort of extended long weekend where they, in addition to facilitating a holiday in Vermont, and they ran various stay to stay long weekends in various parts of the state, they would facilitate networking events with local businesses, they'd facilitate visiting local schools, etc. And so really trying to use the travel experience as a chance to introduce people to a destination that they may want to think about in terms of a permanent move. So the remote working really has just sort of picked up that theme and amplified it. And all around the world, this is just one example of a startup called Outsite, which facilitates and curates that experience. So there's all sorts of businesses like this that will service the digital nomad, as they've been called. So basically they'll look after places of work, find co-working spaces in a particular city. They'll help you identify places where you can perhaps live with other perhaps digital nomads and connect you with that local community. So what's the role of the destination marketing organization, and what is the opportunity for hotels and hospitality? Before we get to that, just one final example, Movers and Shakers from Hawaii. And so this is actually a slightly different take on this whole phenomenon. They're inviting people to come back to Hawaii. So it's particularly targeting the expat Hawaiian community. They try to connect those people with the local community, such as volunteer opportunities in the local community, but they're also consciously trying to diversify the economy. So attracting people who are going to create businesses that reduce their dependence on travel and tourism. And that coming out of the pandemic, the risks of having an economy so heavily reliant on travel and tourism has been highlighted in specific destinations. So let's have a look at what's going on in both a city and a hotel and hospitality business in terms of targeting these opportunities. I want to first pass over to Vera from Helsinki Business Hub. And Helsinki's been a real innovator, a pioneer. We've highlighted Laura and the city of Helsinki before, and we're delighted to be joined by Vera. So Vera, do you want to talk about the 90-day Fiend program and how Helsinki is thinking about this opportunity and targeting it? And you need to unmute yourself as well. Should be down in the bottom left. Perhaps I can unmute you.
There we go. Can you now hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I lost from the bottom, but
no worries. Please.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, and I'm delighted to be here. So I represent Helsinki Business Hub, which is the international trade and investment promotion agency, and also a talent attraction agency for the capital of Finland, like Helsinki. So essentially, we aim to boost the economic growth, innovation, and well-being in Helsinki by attracting foreign companies, investments, and talent to the region. We're fully owned and funded by the city of Helsinki, and we're a sister company to Helsinki Marketing, which I believe is the more familiar organization to this audience. So the city of Helsinki is investing in increasing the international visibility and competitiveness of the city. And as a result, as Chris mentioned earlier, the operations of Helsinki Business Hub and Helsinki Marketing will be merged into a new company called Helsinki Partners in the autumn this year. And we, for one, I'm very much looking forward to working in this new company, because we feel that there are a lot of benefits and synergies to be gained. And in the future, we'll be able to make an even more bigger impact in everything that we do. So during the past year, when kind of the world turned upside down, we felt that the strengths of the Finnish society became even more relevant. And you probably have heard that Finland has been selected as the happiest country in the world for 4 consecutive years. And I think this is a validation that in Finland, like, you can concentrate on the living part as everything else just works. And we're a fairly small market, so the ecosystem is very connected, which enables innovation to spark, and it's also an attractive market for investors. But to be able to grow the economy sustainably, we need more foreign talent and investment. And this sort of set the base for the 90-day Fiend campaign that we launched. this was kind of a response to all the turmoil that was happening in the world and in Silicon Valley last year, like the COVID and the wildfires and the elections. And we noticed that the professionals in the region were getting perhaps a bit discontent and maybe more open to the idea of relocation. So we launched a very targeted campaign aiming to attract the best talent, founders, and investors to Helsinki. And we targeted our activities to Silicon Valley and the surroundings, but we were actually able to get global attention to the program. And just this is not an all expenses paid program. So we offer relocation services to like help with housing and daycare. But we also provide the participant with connections with relevant local ecosystem players. So the participants are responsible for their living and travel cost. And from the over 5,000 applicants, we selected 16 people. Most of them are coming with families. And we were really, really impressed by the quality of the applications. So the selected participants are top professionals in their field. Like some are investors, some are founders, and some are also remote workers. Most are from the US, but there are participants from, for example, Canada, South Africa, India, and Singapore. And when the program was launched, it kind of took us by surprise, the interest. So we gained a lot of top-end organic press coverage. People started sharing the message all over the world. And we even got a lot of positive feedback on our advertising and how well it was targeted. So we were able to reach kind of all the target audience that we were aiming, like the investors and the founders and the talents. And the conversations are sparked across various discussion boards. And what kind of really made us happy was that when somebody had a question or comment, say, about the high living cost of Finland or the salaries not matching the ones in Silicon Valley, there was always someone who offered more information and insight on the topic and sort of defended Finland and brought up the positive sides. And we ourselves didn't really have to step in the conversation at all. At the moment, the program is running virtually, and the on-location program will start in August when all the participants arrive. And we're really, really looking forward to meeting all the participants face to face. So that's kind of the program in short. Do not hesitate to contact me, and I guess we'll discuss this in a bit more detail in a short while.
Yes, thanks, Vera. And that opportunity to really use viral marketing is going to be a theme that I know Maggie's going to pick up on as well. And so Maggie's going to share the experience of Hilton Sandest in seeing the opportunity, really building on something they've been doing for some time with snowbirders in terms of long stay, but really seeing the opportunity around remote workers. So Maggie, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much. So here in the Panhandle of Florida, we typically see a good number of snowbirds that visit us during what we would call our off season from about November to February. So during the pandemic, a lot of what we were trying to do was come up with a clever way to get people to come and stay for longer than just that short 3-day booking time frame that they normally would come, right? Just for a Friday, Saturday, Sunday type of vacation. So with the help of our team at Miles, we decided to kind of rebrand our snowbird package that we had and reach out to this kind of global remote worker that's out there that's sitting somewhere in the freezing cold, dreaming about being on a beach, who now actually has the opportunity to pick up and go because they can work from anywhere. So we rebranded our snowbird package to be called Home at Hilton. And it's only available during the months of December, January, and February, but you had to stay a minimum of 2 weeks up to a month. And in order to get people to come down here, we started advertising to more than just our traditional markets, which for us in the Panhandle would be our Southern Halo states from Alabama, Georgia, even Tennessee out to Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana. And we started looking at more of the Rust Belt and trying to get some people who were in the city, who weren't really getting to go around very much because COVID protocols had them more on a lockdown, and give them the opportunity to still be secluded from a lot of people, have the opportunity to physically distance themselves. We were following all of Hilton's COVID protocols here, so you were still had that sense of safety as far as, you know, masks wearing and cleanliness goes. However, you were able to do your job with the beach as the background. And that sort of additional change of scenery, adding to a little less stress in your life and a little bit more enjoyment out of this lockdown we were all in. So you'll see this video here that the team at Miles put together. Go ahead and play it. Perfect. So we did a lot of campaigns over LinkedIn, specifically targeting a certain type of remote worker. We had the information about a lot of bigger companies that had been shutting down their storefronts completely or reducing the number of employees that would go back into their physical offices. And so once we knew those specific companies, the team at Miles helped us to target those people specifically. And the idea here was that our rates in that time of year are so low or low enough that staying for 2 weeks to a month is essentially like paying a month's rent wherever you lived. So forego your rent, come live with us here at the beach, almost Macaulay Culkin style in Home Alone, and have that sort of adventurous month of getting your work done, but also being able to breathe in the salty air and take in some much needed relaxing time. Next slide. So this is just some more of what we put together with the Miles team as far as our digital ads looked like and our paid social. We ended up booking over $34,000 in total, which was about 300 room nights during December, January, and February. But what was exciting to us was not necessarily what was booked for Home at Hilton, but rather the reach that we were able to get with the Rust Belt in general. Between January and February of this year versus last year, we actually saw a huge increase in the number of people booking a stay, period, just for any time in the year of 2021. For Illinois, for bookings that were made in January and February of 2020, we had about 90. And in 2021, we had about 700. For Indiana, we went from 74 bookings made between January and February of 2020 to over 350 in 2021. So it was exciting to us just to kind of see that there was a new clientele out there in a different area that wasn't our traditional markets that we've now reached because we decided to go after this remote worker who is now able to get out and travel more. So then we had some great PR coverage. We worked with a team out of South Florida at Zapwater Communications, and they got incredible placements, ended up reaching over 700 million monthly subscribers, which was incredible. And we've continued to see some more positive coverage of this even after it's ended. So yeah, that kind of covers everything at Home at Hilton. And I know, Chris, you'll have some more questions for us in just a bit. So
yeah. So before we get to a panel discussion, we want to get your feedback. So your organization, whether you're a destination marketing organization, whether you're an economic development agency, whether you're a tourism or hospitality business, please share what you've been doing in this space. So were you doing it, were you targeting remote workers before COVID-19? You've got some programs running during COVID-19. And or you haven't really looked at this space. So we could get a sense, if you could answer, and we'll have a look at the results in a few seconds. 3, 2, 1. If we close the poll and have a look at the results. So we can see here that small minority, 7% out of the several hundred we got with us today. We're doing it before, so well done to you to be so prescient. About 1 in 5 launched a program during COVID-19. Around 1 in 5 have got some plans in the future, and then you can see there just about 4 out of 10 or so haven't been targeting that space. Okay, so just a couple of themes before we get to some of the Q&A. So Vera and Maggie, obviously some strong results there, but what would you do differently? What worked really well from your perspective, but perhaps more importantly, what lessons did you learn and what would you do differently when and if you relaunch this program in the future? So Vera, do you want to answer first?
Sure. Yeah, we will first very happily surprised about the amount of applications and the quality of the applications. We were not expecting this type of outpour from very skilled and networked and experienced professionals. I mean, we were perhaps expecting a bit less applications, to be honest. But of course, we were really, really happy. And that kind of, I think, resulted in us being able to target our campaign really successfully to the target market and to the target group that we were aiming for. But that kind of also caused us a bit of maybe scheduling issue when we got so many applications that we weren't it caused us a bit of a challenge to go over the applications because we didn't book enough time to actually read all the 5,000 applications, and we didn't have enough resources to begin with. So this is something obviously that we've now learned and we would do differently when and if we launch the campaign the second time, that we would be, reserve enough time for all the applications.
And Maggie, what worked really well, additional to what you've already said, but perhaps more importantly, what would you do different when you look at relaunching this in the winter of 2021, 2022?
Well, I'd say we were quite excited just by realizing we had this new market of people. So I definitely think the data that our team at Miles was pulling for us showed that what we were doing was working really well. The only thing I think we would change is either trying to work with another Hilton property to come up with some sort of piggyback, travel down to us, let us be your end result, and travel back for those who are still not keen on flying, but rather driving down to this area. And another thing would probably just be to kind of look at what we do include in this specific package and make sure that we're giving our remote workers everything they need to be successful while they're here, aside from just, Wi-Fi and coffee. So we'll definitely take a look before we get to the fall and the winter of this year and see if we can kind of revive this program.
Yeah, so Maggie, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? In particular, what sort of feedback you got? Did people really enjoy the experience of working remotely at a hotel and resort? What did they really like, and perhaps what are areas that you're going to tweak or change?
The feedback we got was all really positive. I think a lot of what people enjoyed about being here is that they could not necessarily be down in the sand, which they had access to, obviously, but they could just simply sit out on a balcony and get those ocean views and still get their work accomplished. But I think something that we definitely could consider, and something we were trying to figure out how to execute appropriately during these kind of unprecedented times, was almost having a hub where remote workers could go if they were the kind of person who needed, that very formal setting to be in for even just a few hours to take a meeting or to jump on a Zoom call. So coming up with a way to kind of give them a centralized, almost business location while they're here, so that they can have that more formal setting if they're not simply just answering emails.
Yeah, almost like blending some of the facilities of, say, co-worker spaces,
yes,
such as WeWork and a hotel and resort.
Yes, absolutely. And, we have a crazy amount of banquet space here, about 60,000 square feet of space. So it was kind of like, how do we take what we've got and make it work and ensure that we're able to give people enough space to socially distance themselves and feel comfortable while still having their formal work setting. So definitely something to keep in mind as we go into this next round.
Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting theme to explore more how hotels and resorts need to think about, and convention venues need to think about reshaping themselves. Vera, so in terms of, I gather these workers haven't actually physically arrived yet, but from your past experience in terms of what people have moved to Helsinki, what do they really enjoy, and perhaps what challenges do you try and work with them on to try and minimize any sort of issues around that relocation?
Well, I think a lot of the people who relocate here, they really respect the work-life balance that Helsinki and Finland can offer, and the closeness of the nature, and basically just that living here is not a hassle. Like everything just works. Like the society works. You can trust everybody. There's a safe environment, and like transparency across all sectors, like from the government level downwards. So I guess it's kind of the whole easiness of doing business here and living here, and you know, finding the balance between work and outside work. And I guess this is also something that has come up with the discussions with the 90-day Finns, that these are the things that they value, and these are the things that they actually look forward to when they are coming in August. And we are now in close discussion, of course, with everybody who were chosen to the program, and we offer them now virtual events before they actually arrive here, and also try to provide questions or answers for their questions before they actually come here, so that they are well prepared when they are arriving in August.
Yeah, and what are your plans in terms of staying in touch with the 5,600, was it, people who applied, in terms of engaging them and trying to get them to think about, you know, at least visiting Helsinki, if not relocating? Absolutely,
yeah, that is of course the plan, and we do not want to forget the over 5,000 people who applied and raised their and gave their interest towards living and working in Finland. We launched this platform called Talent Pool at the end of the year, where these people can actually apply. Well, they don't apply, but they sort of register their talent profiles there, and we have local companies. We've given access to local companies to this talent pool, where this is sort of a platform now that the talent who is interested to relocate here, and for the local companies here in the Helsinki region to match and find each other, even though that the companies do not have to necessarily open a position and start searching for talent, but they can go into the talent pool and start searching for suitable candidates. So that's kind of one concrete action that we did in the end of last year. But of course, we want to continue with various marketing and communications activities, and sharing the messages with the 5,000 applicants, and try to provide them with different kinds of opportunities and options, how they can come here and how they can find work, or perhaps set up a business, or if they are investors, like invest in the local companies. So just keeping the conversation open.
Yes, very good. Now we've got a question here from the audience. So Corey, thanks Corey. Corey's asking, did either of you have pushback from the local community? And I'll ask Andrea to also join us, perhaps comment on this. So feedback and concern from local residents has been, you know, a feature, particularly during the height of the pandemic, where people were concerned of outsiders coming into the community, perhaps bringing COVID or creating other issues. That's been improving, certainly in the States, but perhaps Maggie first, and then Vera, did you get any sort of feedback from your community about, you know, actively promoting remote workers to come and live and work at the Hiltons in Destin?
Sure. So, you know, being in the state of Florida, things were a little bit more lax here as states started to reopen. And the time of year that we were asking people to come live and work in our space is a time where this area in the Panhandle is a lot more calm. We're not, you know, seeing the mass amounts of people we normally would for spring break and summer vacations. So we didn't see any pushback from the local community. And I think it's simply because we had already been inundated with visitors throughout the year once our state had reopened and the states around us had. So we were used to seeing outsiders, as you might say, come into our towns, but we also at this time of year, December, January, February, don't have as many active visitors to the area. And so the amount of people we had coming to 300 rooms that we had booked didn't necessarily make a giant impact on our local area to cause any sort of friction with any locals.
Very good. And Vera, I know Finland's been really a standout performer in Europe in terms of how you've handled it. So obviously you've been conscious about this and are conscious moving forward. How are you keeping local residents on site around your efforts to reach out and attract remote workers?
Well, of course, we were very careful in our messaging that safety comes first, and we originally planned to have the participants here in Finland and in Helsinki in March, but due to the COVID situation, we postponed the on location part of the program until August, just to ensure that the safety aspects are taken care of. So obviously some people were concerned, and since Finland has been coping quite well on a global level to the pandemic, people were a bit concerned, but there was also a lot of positive feedback on the program that this is actually something that we need, because there is a definite need for foreign talent and foreign investment in Finland and in Helsinki. So it was more of a positive vibe, I think, around the program, that this is definitely something that we need, and everybody kind of understood that safety comes first, and then we'll continue with the program when we know that it's safe.
Yeah, very good. And Andrea, do you want to comment on what we've seen in terms of the improvements around the concerns people have? So I think even just 2 months ago, around half of all Americans were saying they didn't really feel comfortable going out to a local restaurant or shopping locally. And then a similar percentage, if not greater, were saying they didn't feel comfortable opening up their community. So obviously we've seen significant improvement in the last couple of months.
Been a lot of improvement. And, it's Chris, like you highlighted from our last wave, that having clear health and safety messages are so important to get travelers to our destinations. But it also has to happen within our community with our residents as well, because when we started to see the trend upward in feeling comfortable with welcoming visitors back, we also started seeing at the same time a consistent trend that was happening with feeling comfortable getting out in their own community. And it's, Vera, like you were mentioning, y'all were really leading with that health and safety message. Your residents have to feel comfortable first, moving around in their own community. And that's really driven by clear health and safety messaging. And then that also ties in very heavily. If they're not comfortable going to a restaurant that's somewhere that they're familiar with, they're not going to be familiar with having that, kind of an outsider come in. And so it really goes so hand in hand in keeping the resident informed, making the resident feel comfortable, and then having that same messaging and education to travelers. It's a twofold thing that has to happen.
Yeah, some great points there. So we've got a very wonderful friend and an old colleague, Wendy Keel. Hello, Wendy, out there in Los Angeles. Wendy's asking you, Maggie, first, but perhaps all of you may want to comment on this. So have you developed a sort of demographic profile of those who participated in the program? So what are the sort of characteristics in terms of age, interests, outlook, etc., that really seem to be reflective of the people who engaged with your program first, Maggie? And then if Vera or Andrea, you've got any comments about the types of people who are most receptive to this messaging around moving for a short or longer period to work somewhere else?
Sure. So unfortunately, we don't have a ton of information to kind of develop a specific profile on these folks who came to visit us. All we really know is the location they were coming from. And that's simply a privacy concern when people make reservations here. And we're not exactly at the front desk to, kind of give them the third degree. Where you're from? What do you like to do? But just based on the demographic of people that we saw in the building during those times, it varied in age range, mostly in that late 30s to kind of early 40s is where we see a lot of our guests that came for this specific kind of program, which was nice for us. We did try to market to more of millennials because we figured that that was the generation that had been so eager to travel prior to the pandemic. And then they also are the ones who had less keeping them in a specific area, less ties to specific areas aside from, maybe their dogs. So, yep. Unfortunately, we don't have a specific kind of demographic aside from knowing the kind of age range and the destinations of where they traveled from. But it's definitely something that we look to our team at the Miles research group to let us know our Google Analytics and a little bit more about the folks who at least looked into the program and visited our website to tell us if we were advertising to the right people who were interested, but maybe just didn't have the financial capabilities or were a little bit too scared to travel due to safety issues.
Vera, do you have any comments on that in terms of what did you learn in terms of people who are most receptive to this type of messaging and campaigns from a psychographic demographic perspective?
Well, we're also working on putting together the more detailed information. Also, we didn't ask the age or the gender or any type of piece of information from the participant or the applicants. But we did we targeted our messaging towards the ICT, more of to the ICT sector and the talent and the professionals, investors, founders in that sector. And I think what we've gone through from the applications, they are like a very diverse bunch of people who actually applied for the program. But I guess what surprised us also most was that most of the people were looking to relocate with their families and not they were not like single people or individuals, only individuals, but they were actually looking for a family, a location that would be fit for family. So and I guess that also says something that they were, a lot of them were looking for longer term plans than just for the 90 days that we initially sort of offered for them. But we're also, as mentioned, like working on the data and then really digging more deeply into the applications and the demographics and things.
That'd be wonderful to see. And Andrea, we asked this question, I know, with Longwoods a couple of months ago, and about 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 Americans had worked remotely at some point during the pandemic. But do you have any further observations about who they are?
We're in the process of releasing our Travel USA data for 2020. And as I was writing it down when you asked this question, we can dig into the business traveler a little bit more. In general, for travel in general last year, it got younger, the American traveler. Travel party size went up. The average age of the traveler went down a little bit, not too surprisingly. The older populations were at higher risk. And this was a health and safety crisis or a health crisis. This was not a financial crisis when we talk about travel decisions. But Chris, I'll take a look in our data and see when we start looking at those business travelers and those longer haul trips. And I'll send that to y'all so y'all have that on hand.
Yeah, so we'll be sure to post that. Just a reminder of final resources. So we'll wrap up the Q&A then. So thanks so much to Vera, to Maggie, and to Andrea for joining us today. It's been wonderful. I just want to share some final resources. This week, actually on Thursday, is Earth Day. There's been a lot of discussion about building back better and really using this moment to rethink in a more thoughtful way how travel and tourism can be even more a net benefit to the communities and to the environment that we obviously rely on. And so in honor of that, we've pulled together some resources for you, and it's a strategy toolkit. So thinking about the planning that you may wish to do in your own destination, we can see on the next slide, whether it's a destination development strategy, whether it's a sustainable tourism strategy. We've created this sort of strategy toolkit, which includes tips and suggestions. It's got examples of leading destination development and sustainable tourism strategies from around the world. And it's got insights and other examples of RFPs or expression of interest documents that various agencies have used. So a great starting point for thinking about your own destination development plan. And in honor of a project we've been investing in over the last year or so, and Wendy Keel was part of that. So thanks again, Wendy, for your wonderful input. All of the agencies and indeed Wendy contributed our time and effort for free into this, really looking at options and opportunities for funding, tourism taxation, levies, and other funding models that are going to work coming out of this crisis. And so we've actually created a couple of blogs, one for US and Canadian cities, one for New Zealand destinations. We'll be looking at adding iterations of this for other parts of the world, really distilling that down into a set of recommendations, but all sorts of options, examples, and case studies on building back your funding better are available there. Our next Clarity in a Time of Change webinar is picking up on this theme. We'll be looking at resilience and reimagination. So how do you build resilience? And you should be, obviously, as we come out of this pandemic, working on this now. So practical, immediate actions that destinations across North America and Europe are working on now with our good friends at Couragio and the Global Destination Sustainability Movement. They'll be speaking along with North American and European destinations. You can see there, Tuesday, March 25th. So thank you so much for joining us today. Please join us on that Clarity in a Time of Change web portal. Stay safe, stay well, and have a great rest of your day.